Allow me two little remarks before I start. As you see, I'm still the president of this society, German Orthopaedic and Trauma Society, and we had just a very successful meeting in Berlin with more than 12,000 people attending, which is definitely now the largest meeting in orthopedics and traumatology in Europe. And surprising, maybe for you, it was more than 3,000 participants international from 60 nations. So this is the one thing. And the other thing is that I'm a co-founder of the German registry. And Philipp, we are better than you said. We had just an EC meeting last week, executive committee, and we have now reached more than 1 million cases in our registry, documented. 70% of all operations of hip and knee replacement in Germany are documented. And we signed just last week a contract with the German Ministry of Health that it will be mandatory next year. So the volume and the power of this registry is very important. In a short time, more than 1 million cases, and not only cemented cases like the Swedish, and not only 2 implants in the whole registry, and we document almost 90 million people now. So this is a very powerful registry, and it will start next year. We have a German implant registry now, and it will start with hip and knee implants. And later on, there will be breast, heart valves, whatever. But it will start with our work. And what you said before, we control the data. And this was the fighting for more than a year, that the German Orthopaedic and Trauma Society is responsible for the data and the control of the data, which was a big goal for us, because otherwise you get stupid results that can be shown in many registries, like cement does well, do not well. In our registry, we have more deaths with the cemented cases. Why that? More people die in 90 days after the surgery if they are cemented than not cemented. We don't understand it fully, but it's a high number. Anyway, now to the topic. How much innovation is still possible? Maybe you know this. This was innovation in 1890. This very serious-looking guy just did it. He used some marble, ivory, and put it into the knees, put it into hips in tuberculosis cases, and it was not so very successful. There was no randomized study. There was nothing. And if you look on these great innovators, everybody of you knows Mark Freeman, who showed you immediately his not so beautiful knee and discussing everything with you. And the Germans on this paper, Heinz Wagner or Mittelmeier, they were great innovators in endoprosthesis. Charnley, Insole, all these people were great innovators. And I'm old enough to know some of them, at least personally. And if you look how they innovated anything, it was just a little bit by trial and error. It was not so scientific like everybody wants to make us believe. They did not so many studies. Charnley was on holidays when his engineer, with a German engineer from a chemistry company, came in, and they tried the polyethylene. He didn't like polyethylene at all. He was always on his Trevira stuff or whatever. A Teflon he used. Thought, my wife at home, Teflon, great, in the pan. So, and it was by chance that he invented polyethylene, and it was not by him, and it was just that he was on holidays and the engineer could try it. He has forbidden to do that. So this was innovation of these great innovators. How does innovation work? Anyway, there's a lot of innovators. You all are probably innovators. And this is only a little sample of total knees. I could show you an even bigger slide on total hips, on revision implants, and whatever. So we have done this for many years, and then we had this problem here, that these breast implants were exploding in the air, women flying, and suddenly the bad quality stuff, breast implants, exploded. And why could this happen? Why could this be that this was allowed to use? How could it be that these hip resurfacing implants were allowed to be used and not, for a long time not detected? There's reasons for that. There's many implants on the market that did not so well. And not only the implants and the production of these implants was a problem, also the notified bodies who control this, who give the CE sign, whatever, had a big problem. So they are both in a trouble. Also, the notified bodies, why didn't they detect that? And, of course, the politicians and the public were angry, and now we have the trouble. In fact, there was never more innovation in healthcare than today, not only in our field, orthopedics. If you look on all the implants that can get infected, like Trampus always shows, it's an enormous amount of innovation in the implants that we have. And with all these problems, we got, by the politicians, by the European Union, new legal framework for medical devices. This is a completely new law. It's not an adaptation of existing devices. And this will transform our way of innovation very much and influence also very much. It's directly applicable in all European Union member states. The Swiss are lucky, they are not in the European Union, but I'm sure you will have to do the same like we do, and you will not be able to send any product to the big market of the European Union if it's not fulfilling these regulations. So it's not that you just say, oh, it's almost the same. You have to run a complete new CE certification. And it's really true because we had these problems. We have the public, we have the politicians, and now we have these new laws. And Pierre Kiersgaard Andersen wrote this beautiful article in Effort's newsletter, and he really states there that we probably have to face that these new regulations may be a problem for the availability of orthopedic implants. Because if a company has to run a very, very difficult process to get it allowed to sell this product for slow numbers, for very low numbers of revision implants, do you really do this? You earn not enough money. We have this in pharmacy as well. For all these diseases where you have only some thousand people in the world, there may be good drugs, but they are not sold, they are not developed because it's not a market. And if the regulations are so strict that you have high costs and little income, it may happen that we have not all the good implants available in the future that we need. We will look how this process is going on. And maybe these revision implants especially, whatever, maybe not selling in such large numbers. 2 more implants, and implants for severe and not so frequent cases may be not available anymore because they need all a full new registration, very expensive, very long lasting. And what is with our own implants that we do in the OR? You do a spacer like this. I do sometimes this. Take an old Küncher nail, you never fail. I put it in, and then you're happy. You will not be allowed to use this anymore. So it started a long time ago. It's getting more and more concrete, and now 2017, like you said, like I showed you from the paper from Kiersgaard, it is now implemented. And it's not an update of this medical device stuff. It's a completely new regulatory system. And you have to go through with all your implants to this process, expensive, and there will be things not be regulated in this process. And this is what the notified bodies tell me. This is a slide from Labeck, who is working now for a notified body in the south of Germany, TÜV Süd. And he said to me, this way, the equivalence route, which was very easy, will not be accepted in the future. You have to do clinical investigations. And these two screws look the same, and before you could say, okay, it's the same, it was on the market, and we just make a copy, and now this copy is the same, and it gets a CE certification. This will not work anymore in the future. So if you do copies from well-known old implants and want to sell it, they will not accept it in these notified bodies because they are also under pressure. They are afraid that, again, there is this breast implant scandal with another implant. So this means clinical studies will be very important if they are well done. And of course, these notified bodies have to go to all these processes. They have to go to systematic reviews, Cochrane reviews, they do meta-analysis. They have all to check this before they get in the next process. And registries, of course, but knowing the biases of registries. If you have a small country with 3-4 million people and do only some implants, be aware that you may not have all results that you need. And the goal is to have a real-world evidence in the end. The registries have been discussed, registry definitions also, and as I'm a co-founder of our registry and have own hospital registries and more than 20 years in my place, I know where the downsides are also of registries. So the point is that it will be more complicated. All these regulations will be more complicated to fulfill. And still, be aware, it's good for us surgeons that our clinical data and the patient-reported results become more important because they show you the real outcome. If you look, design is a nice thing, production, risk management, you do all this, but in the end, the clinical data provide information on the outcome of the entire treatment chain, the final validation, whether there's a good or bad surgeon, a good or bad implant. The story with the surgeon is absolutely underestimated. And in the Australian registry, we see that there are very bad surgeons. And now you have this data on the registry. And now the lawyers come, and there's a very high-ranked advocate of the court who is now really giving a hard time to the Australian registry. You have this data. Why don't you do anything with this guy? And that's what we said to our Ministry of Health. If you take care for our registry, if we have outliers, you are responsible to do this, not the Orthopaedic Society. We cannot do this, but we must think of it. It must be done by somebody if you have bad results. And there's good reasons in so highly estimated registries like the British. Why didn't they find out that the hip resurfacing did not work? Why? Because the surgeons did not tell that they had complications, because if they would tell, they were not paid anymore and kicked out of the system. So this registry had a big problem. And you have to really look, if you look on registry data, what it is. And so clinical data, registries, follow-up studies, final validation is the best. You have to look on the patient's complaints, registries, clinical studies. Everything comes to the notified bodies, and the process will be more difficult and longer. Then maybe the recall comes in time, maybe too late. So today, we have a big data volume in all fields of our world, and we have to concentrate it to results. And this is the work of these notified bodies, but also our problem, because we have the problem that not all can be certified in the future anymore. Of course, it was easy when Themistocles Gluck put in his first implant, Industry 1.0, steam engines. And today, we are in a more complex world, and it's not allowed anymore in this complex world just to do it by trial and error, and if it's not working, sad. More evidence is required, and the politicians and the public wanted. More evidence in recent publications, in registries, and the design must be controlled, and the follow-up studies, like in my hospital, like the American publications. If you look on the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery, US, it's one big guy telling in my hands, in my hospital, I have a nice follow-up, everything's working great. That's stupid nonsense. It's nothing to do with the real facts. And these studies will not be accepted anymore in the notified bodies. Nobody wants to hear this. And hopefully they will not be paid in the future by the industry anymore. And they are paid. You can go on the internet and look dollars.com, or you look dollars.doc. Then you see how much an average American surgeon gets from which company. Very interesting. All the 12 big guns that I know are over 12 million a year. Can you really tell the truth in your studies if you're paid like that? And we must look that we do the right statistics. This is the good old story of the Stork population, the birth rate in Europe, and it's a good tool to detect this study, but it was correlating, and correlating may not be right. So casualties may not be the real truth. Both went down in Germany and in Europe, but I think it's no correlation. Impact, we need new data sources, registries, meta-analysis, and interpretation of aggregated data from all sources. More manpower probably is necessary, and professional expertise. The notified bodies are also under a serious pressure. I've telephoned preparing this talk with Labeck in Munich, and they have a hard time with the politicians, so they will give this back to the companies and to us and ask for more data and more exact data. And it's not only the genius, it must also work well over not 1 year, maybe over a long time. So we started with trying to do the same things a little bit better. Then we did new things, which was very good for us all because it's interesting. And now we have really to prove that the new things do it better than the old things. All the new implants on the market have a hard time to show that they are better than the old. Especially in total hips, we have seen this, that about a third of the new implants are not better than the old ones. Innovation is and will be possible. We have other legal requirements and processes, more quality management than try and error, and for use, you know, it's a nice picture, transform Karstadt Quelle into Amazon, and you will have the possibility to have good results that are also allowed to do. And this is a thing in innovation that I find really impressive. It's not the strongest of the species, this was the Neanderthaler, that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. And there will always be creative people with great innovations, but today we have really to prove that they are better than what we already have. Otherwise, politicians and public and our patients give us a hard time. Thank you very much.